This episode is about minutes 6 through 10 of Solo, a Star Wars story, which starts with Han and Qi'ra escaping from Lady Proxima and ends with them getting in line at the spaceport. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Xanthe Tan, you can call me Xanthe, and today is all about minutes 6 through 10 of Solo, featuring Kyle Katarn, a returning guest to the show. We're going to be talking about Solo, which features this whole Corellia Chase part. Hello, Kyle.
Hello there. Thanks for having me back on the show. I'm really excited to talk about Solo with you.
Me too.
I feel like for the Last Jedi discussion, we got like possibly the juiciest 5 minutes to talk about. And here we are again with like a really, really good section with the whole chase. A little bit of Proxima action and a little bit of Spaceport action, like 3 distinct beats in this 5 minutes.
Totally. We go from, we have like 3 distinctly different sections and it goes through pretty fast. In fact, the whole Corellia Chase like track on the soundtrack just starts and ends in this minutes. Like it's encapsulated within this set of minutes.
It's cool too, because even though it's a very short amount of time, all 3 of those moments feel drastically different in terms of like the theme and the intensity of them, and yet it doesn't mess with the pacing in any way and feels like it very naturally flows through all 3 of them.
Yeah, this is such an interesting score to talk about, an interesting film to talk about in terms of the soundscape, because it's not, one of the main trilogy movies, and it's one of those quote unquote like a Star Wars story movies. So it has a different composer. But actually on this score, John Williams did write, some of the themes. So
did he write the Solo theme?
Yes.
Dum ba-da-dum bum bum. Okay, I thought it had his flair to it.
Yeah, totally.
Where were we?
Right. So with The Last Jedi, we had the Praetorian Guard like showdown, the fight scene, that really amazingly choreographed fight scene. And here, I think it's funny that we have this speeder chase, which is probably the main part of the minutes, but it's certainly not the full part of the minutes. And this chase, the shots and the angles and the way that the music, early morning, the way that the music transitions in orchestration between the shots is going to be really interesting to talk about. Do you want to just get into it by starting to listen to it?
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
All right.
I'm ever gonna learn.
What did you say?
I said, next time somebody hits me, I hit him back.
Breckenfish.
Molek, wait! Don't.
Qi'ra, remember the silo? We pulled you out of that horror, gave you a home. Don't throw it away for Han. He's not worth it.
Whatever he lost on the deal, we'll earn it back double. We will make it up to you.
Still waiting for the music.
Yeah, it's interesting there's no music yet.
What's that supposed to be?
This is a thermal detonator that I just armed.
That's a rock.
No, it's not.
I like that part.
Yes, it is. And you
I
just
love it.
made a clicking
Do you hear the
sound
music in the
from
background?
that.
Please tell me this isn't your plan.
No.
Okay, I'll stop it
There's
right
that
there.
little glissando, builds up the tension, and then it cuts out again for her reaction to the scream.
And prior to that, so the first 40 seconds is no music, and it's just when Han is talking to Lady Proxima, who has just ascended from her pool of water where she lives. Yeah, it's a very wormy situation that's happening right now. Super wormy.
It creates a great implication that Han is just someone who's beholden to big goofy puppets his whole life. Like he goes from Proxima to Jabba the Hutt to like who knows what would be next.
That's true. And here we have a character not speaking in basic, and that's Moloch. And that is I guess he's one of the main white worms.
Right.
And what language is he speaking?
I think he's speaking Huttese.
Okay. That's what I thought, but usually it says like speaking Huttese in the subtitles or something, but I don't know, it didn't. Maybe it doesn't usually say that. Maybe that's just a Disney Plus thing. I don't know.
Well, he has hard coded subtitles. He says like coaxium is
Exactly.
precious, and it'll just say. I feel like the Disney Plus will add a little bit of like if you're watching it with captions on, it'll says something in Huttese.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the legacy movies, like Jabba, it never said the language. It just said in yellow subtitles what he was saying.
Oh, and Greedo too.
And Greedo, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The same situation with him. They usually just throw the words up there, but like subtitles, closed captioning, they'll add a little bit of context in there.
Yeah,
Speaking
yeah.
Huttese or something like that.
So here, after Han says, "I said next time somebody hits me, I hit him back." What Moloch says is, "Not if I shoot you." And then, which is
Can't argue with
really
that
funny,
that
which
logic.
is Han is always having some sort of a shoot up. Who will they shoot? Will they not with someone? Always, it's his lot in life. And then Qi'ra's like, "Wait!" And here, I really like Lady Proxima's delivery of this line. I don't know, it's really memorable. It's one of those. I don't know. I feel like it's a very Star Wars villain or Star Wars at least side characters. I feel often have a very interesting like intonation to their voice. You know, she's like, "Remember the silo? We pulled you out of that horror, gave you a home." I can't do it, but her voice is incredible.
She does sound kind of like exasperated and also persuading. Like, do we have to go through this again? Like, remember, I've told you this 1,000 times.
Mhm.
It's a great performance. And
It is.
sometimes the voice alone doesn't really convey it, but then when you like add it to this big goofy rubber puppet face, it like just creates this weird, just really weird situation, and it's very Star Warsy, and I love it.
And she's wearing like a lot of jewelry, isn't she?
Oh, it's the symbols of her station, her status.
Yeah.
She's a well-to-do slumlord who lives in a sewer, like
Yes,
literally
yes.
in the sludge, like under the ground.
So her species is Grindalid, and they are sensitive to light, which will come up in just a second. So she lives underwater in this, I don't know what to call it, in this pool of water. She lives underwater, and to talk to people or to talk to Han, she has to come up. And so it's like this big thing, and she's huge. She ascends, and she has all these little appendages and two main appendages. And yeah, it's quite a wormy sight.
Is vestigial the right word
Possibly.
for those smaller limbs? I don't know. I'm not great with my gross terminology, but that's totally what's going on there. And she's a great creature, great design. I think it's absolutely hilarious that she couldn't really do much if it really boiled down to it. Like, you know, that authority and that delegation to her gang really is important because can she even leave the water? Like, not confirmed that she has any sort of physical ability here, but she commands the room nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused about her. Like, is it sort of like how insects will have like a queen and like their physiology is like a little bit different than everyone else?
It wouldn't be the first time that a species has had like drastic variations. Like look at the fact that Senator Ornfree Ta has a different number of leku than other Twi'leks. Sometimes males have cones, sometimes they have ears. There is an inconsistency, and I wouldn't be surprised if Moloch was the same species.
I think Moloch is the same species. That's why I'm confused. But
right, it's maybe they're all her children. She spawned them all, or something like a queen situation, like you're saying. Like maybe with the Geonosians, they do something similar.
Now that I think about it, I do remember that she lives in the pool with her like hatchlings. So I think there is something to that.
Okay. Yeah. So her enforcers eventually hatch and they come out and
yeah.
And what about the dogs? Are the dogs also her hatchlings? Because they're like the same color.
Question. I think what's happening is like this is where the white worms live, which is like the gang, and a lot of them are Grindalids as well, and so that's why it's all in the dark and everything because they can't see the light. They're like vampires, kind of. And there are also like humans and other like urchlings or whatever she calls them. What does she call them? Scallywags? I can't. Or what does Moloch say?
Urchins, right?
Something like that, where he's like, "You're a dime a dozen." That's definitely not the line, but it's something to that vibe. Oh yeah, scum rats. That's what it is.
Scum rats.
He says coaxium is precious. Scum rats like you come cheap. So yeah, like the kids and everything protect the den. And it's weird. She's like maternalistic over everyone, but she's also, yeah. I guess that's not the first time we'd see a
It's that
villain being.
manipulative maternity, the same way like Oliver Twists, like, like
Oh
the guy
yeah.
the guy running the show, like he had this like paternal feeling, but it was all a manipulation. It's like totally that's the same sort of angle Proxima comes at these street scum rats at.
Yeah. I guess it does make sense now that I'm thinking about like all the villains that have lots of underlings.
I
Um,
love the rock joke that he
oh my God,
pretends
me
it's a
too.
grenade. And I feel like that is a holdover from Lord and Miller's writing, who were originally in charge of Solo, and they had like a much more comedic, almost like an ad-libbed style of shooting. And eventually that was replaced by Ron Howard, who did it very straightforward. But I really feel like that was one of the holdovers from their era of filming the show, because it felt so like comedic and just like lighthearted, and like even though it did fit into the scene, it just felt like it was directed by someone else. It just had that feeling to me.
Interesting. Um, I'm not familiar with his other or his work, Lord Miller. The
It's Phil Lord and someone Miller. It's a duo,
right,
and they were
right.
hired together to write Solo originally. I'm not super familiar with the work either. I learned about them through the context of I learned about them when it was announced that they were writing it, and then I like looked up their other stuff. But yeah, it's all like heavy on the comedy and like improvisation and ad lib are really encouraged on the sets, and so it just like it's a little bit more of a free form process, and I guess that wasn't really what they were looking for with their huge multi-million-dollar. They wanted everything very much by the numbers, and so a lot of stuff was there were a lot of reshoots involved, and like Ron
Right.
Howard kind of had to come in and triage the film. But I'm sure that a lot of things were left in, and I really feel like this is one of those moments, and I don't know how to ever get confirmation on that, but
Yeah, so I'm surprised that this moment works for me, but it really like I think it's funny every time. And in case you missed it, because it sounded very realistic, potentially, I don't know. Han literally does hold up a rock and then just go like I can't do it with my mouth. Like I can't do it. Can you make them? Yeah, he like does like a mouth click and says, "This is a thermal detonator," and then clicks his mouth that I just armed. And Proxima's like, "That's a rock, and you just made a clicking sound with your mouth."
just fully calls him out.
Yeah.
I feel like it's an authentically Han Solo thing to do.
Absolutely. That is true. Maybe that's why I like it, because it feels in character for Han. Absolutely. And Kira's like, "Please tell me this isn't your plan." And then this is where the music starts. And like you said, it's a glissando, which is like a sliding up, and it's on the strings and it's layered. So like there are multiple people playing it at the same time, but not on the same note. So it's one of those
Creating
things where
a
it's
dissonance,
not like you don't have where it kind of goes like it's like a riser, like but with multiple people kind of playing it and layering it on different notes, it ends up sounding like, I don't know. I can't do it with just two strings, but yeah, it ends up being this like gradual, suspenseful. It's a pretty standard horror type of cue, and it's really like a riser that kind of crescendos. It gets louder until it cuts off.
yeah, usually with an abrupt ending like that. I really like when Howard Shore does it in Lord of the Rings. He always has a tremolo on the glissando, so it's like extra
Mm.
intense, it's like a shaky slide up.
Like a
Yep, there it is. I love it.
I tweeted last night that what did I say? I was like falling asleep. What did I say? I said that John Powell writes like a violinist, and he is a violinist.
Oh, well,
Um,
that makes sense then.
yeah, yeah. So I like moments like that. If you're following along on the soundtrack, this is on. You can hear this on the deluxe version, on the track called Bunk/Proxima 1M2-3, and it's toward the end of it. And let me actually just play some of that so you can hear it more clearly. That's not it. Here we go. Here we go. Yep. So that's how that ends, with an abrupt cutoff. And then Han reveals, no, this is his plan. And he throws the rock through the window. It breaks the glass, and the light just floods in and hits Lady Proxima, and her skin can't take the light, so she dives back
Burns
in.
her all in the face.
Yeah. And she lets out this like really primal howl. It's pretty amazing. It's a pretty gnarly howl, I'll have to say. And then it's go time. Han and Qi'ra start to make their escape.
It's pretty cool that this is the first moment that we hear Han's theme, and it's just sort of establishing it first, but as the chase goes on, it gets more intense, yes, but also gets more confident. And I feel like it's mirroring Han himself getting more confident, like, oh crap, this is actually going to work. Like, as all of his antics do, it starts off as a Hail Mary, and then when he gets a little bit of success, he starts to get confident. He's like, okay, now we're 100% into this plan. And I think that's really reflected in the music. I love the way that they kind of use Han's theme in the soundtrack to mirror however he's feeling in that given moment. Like we're like to jump a little bit ahead, like further on in the chase, he's sitting there. You can see him being elated. He's having his big plans with Qi'ra, talking about how they're never going to be beholden to anyone. They've got this coaxium. They're free now. And then Moloch pulls up alongside them, and he's like, oh crap, I thought we had more of a lead than that. And then suddenly the music reflects danger, and like it goes into the low end, and it's more of a bum dun dun, and less of this like legato, flowery, like, oh look at us, we're freedom, we're not like scum rats anymore. And then suddenly dun dun dun. And it's great how close to his mood the music always sort of stays.
That's a good point. And yeah, okay. His confidence really his music reflects his confidence, and John Williams did write several variations of his theme to reflect those different states. So let's get into where we start to hear that.
Get in.
An M68?
Nice, right?
I love it.
So far we've already heard one of the themes.
Those first few.
What was that?
I said it's not quite resolving those first few times that you hear it.
Yeah, it keeps.
He's unsure if it's going to work.
Yeah, like it goes like do 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 do, and then it kind of has percussion, and then it switches gears, and it doesn't fully play all the way out.
Question mark at the end of each of those phrases.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So the theme that starts playing there is, if you follow along in Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars, he does have a few themes listed for solo, and this is one of the John Williams themes. It's the young Han Solo. It's the heroic version, so it would just be the do 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 do. That's what it is. And so that's how we start. And then let's see if we start to hear some of the other ones in a second. This is heroic again. We're still doing the heroic. Which makes sense.
It's increasing with his confidence.
Yeah, it is like like the orchestration and the key is sort of ascending. And you can't hear it as much in the context of the film as you can if you're following along on the soundtrack. This is literally just the track Corellia Chase, and it plays out pretty fully. If I remember correctly, like there might be a couple things that are maybe cut out or lengthened, but it actually sounds pretty much there. The violins, like I love how the brass or like the melody is always like kind of anchoring, like because it's kind of a slow melody, all things considered.
Totally.
And then it's like the orchestra in the background that's doing the fast parts. So we have the violins doing these I don't know.
It's bold of you to start your action theme on a whole note.
Right. That's so true. They're going like they're accompanying, but they're the more like exciting part. You could
They
say.
add the intensity in, so the bum can just sort of drone in, but still be impactful because there's momentum behind it.
Yeah, momentum's a good a good word. And ever since Book of Boba Fett, which we're recording this after Book of Boba Fett season 1 has just finished, um, when I've been thinking about land speeder chases a lot, and how the music influences how they come off on screen. And here we have another speeder chase, and I think it comes off completely different than how it does in Book of Boba Fett. And
Absolutely. I think it's filmed completely different too. Like the camera
absolutely.
angles are very deliberate to show extreme action. Like you have all these vehicles quickly passing and the camera has to turn to follow the action. Book of Boba Fett was a whole lot of established shots, like wide shots of things coming down a long alley. And so there wasn't really the same feeling of velocity. And I think that's on purpose.
Yeah. I think it definitely felt like a stylistic choice, put it that way. It didn't feel like
Totally.
yeah, it felt like a stylistic choice. And I I think going back to the creature of Lady Proxima, I think treatment of creatures is also something I'm very interested in. How all of the elements like the camera angles, the music and the sound design can work to make that come off in certain ways, like that either err on the funnier or the more fantastical or other sides. And so,
Or
yeah,
sometimes it's tongue in cheek and they lean into like the fact that it looks goofy.
yes,
Not necessarily for the sake of comedy though, just for the sake of like paying tribute to what came before it. Like to briefly go back to the Book of Boba Fett, so many of those background aliens had just big, silly, floppy alien heads, and they weren't trying to make them as realistic as possible. They were trying to make them evocative of the 70s. And
mm,
so sometimes they go that route as well, like almost for like a tribute reason, more so than just the comedy of what you're looking at. You're looking at it for a tradition reason.
definitely. And so I think that's I think being able to shed or being able to emphasize different aspects of things that look like the same Star Wars DNA, it shows how much variety there is in like interpretation of these classic, like emblematic styles and characters and whatever. Like
Absolutely.
we think Star Wars looks a certain way, and even if you make something that looks that way, you can still give it a completely different energy or completely different
Right.
like vibe. So yeah, there's great variation even in sticking to the basics of what came before. And the same goes for the music. Here,
Totally.
yeah, this is a lot of this feels familiar, and a lot of it feels familiar, but in a new type of way. And that's something that's
I
interesting
feel
about
like
the
it must
score.
be really tough for a contemporary Star Wars composer to walk the line between feeling authentic without just feeling like you're emulating John Williams. Like because Solo is a new Star Wars story with a character we know, but we don't know the story, and the music should reflect that, and the music should feel fresh, and it shouldn't just feel like someone trying to do their very best John Williams impression, which we have heard before. Like a lot of the video game Star Wars soundtracks will have that. Like there's like the, it feels like someone's just trying to copy it without really bringing any sort of a new flavor to the table, and so it sounds the same but not quite as authentic. Whereas Powell, Giacchino, everyone who's taken a crack at these new movies has really brought like a new flavor to it, and you can
Mm,
hear what came from Williams, and you can hear what Powell is contributing here as well. And like I totally welcome it. It doesn't feel any less Star Warsy to me. It just feels more new.
mm. I think it's such. Well, we'll get to the Star Wars Music Minute questionnaire later, but the reason that I ask that first question that we'll get to is because everyone has a different meaning when they say whether something sounds like Star Wars. Like everyone means kind of a little bit of a different thing, and um, yeah, emulating other composers or trying to copy other composers is even in a best case scenario. Even if you did, it's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. Like,
I'm not trying to throw any shade on people who do that, especially Star Wars composers who have done that, because that's usually literally the job description. Like they
yeah,
hire
yeah.
you to do
Oh, I
Battlefront
know. Yeah,
soundtrack.
I
They're
didn't
like,
think
I
you were
want you to
throwing
sound
shade.
like John Williams. Don't make it your own. That's all we want, and that's what they do. And that you can't really criticize that composer in good faith because he's literally just
Absolutely.
doing his job. But when it comes to a major offering like Solo, like Rogue One, there needs to be something fresh in there. If John Williams isn't doing the whole score, then you need to make it your own.
Absolutely. While still like John Powell, like I've heard him in interviews talk about how racked with nerves he was to do this.
Oh God, I can only imagine.
And yeah, I can't. It's like a nightmare scenario for me. I would not want to walk in these shoes at all.
I do, but I don't. I so
Right.
don't want to handle that nightmare of a headache, you know?
Right. Because there are certain things that you want to capture and certain things that you want to make your own, but what you decide to capture and what you decide to make your own can really, there's so much variety in what that means because
Right.
sometimes it's easy to, like I'll just say a lot of people, or at least in the classical world, used to talk about John Williams as someone who rips off of other composers, like classical composers, like romantic composers and such.
Sure, sure.
And the thing with that is, it's actually really hard to like. It's actually I'm impressed as a fellow composer, but not definitely not even close to John Williams level. As a composer, it's not easy to just rip. It's not even easy to rip off of these compose like to actually embody their their style and sensibility and way of like and way of harmonic movement and to actually embody that enough to imitate them is so hard, and the fact that John Williams can channel so many composers, so many different composers and styles fluidly is really
It's a massive
amazing.
testament of skill. Absolutely masterful. Like to use a visual allegory, it's like someone who is like an artist, a painting forger, but he can forge like Picasso's and Matisse and like all kinds of things. And someone tries to say, well, he's just copying what's yeah, but he's doing it flawlessly. It's
Yeah, and
like he's
it's hard
demonstrating the same level of skill as all of those original masters, and
and it's
that
hard
is
and
like
it's hard to
huge.
yes, and John Powell definitely like he really cares going going deep and not just trying to recreate like a facade of John Williams. I think that's what it is like a lot of people do recreate a facade of John Williams
That's the perfect word.
that actually doesn't
Facade.
even capture John Williams is it just captures like an imitation of John Williams. And so it comes off as
Exactly.
like a little bit shallow. And so it
It's
is
like Star Wars
hard.
music.
Right. So it is hard to actually like get some of the skills of John Williams and then be able to work in that toolbox and do something else, but still have the tools. So so anyway, um,
It's not just the skill set and the tools, and then also just the innate voicing of John Williams. You have to understand why he has the musical philosophy that he has to be able to anticipate what choice he would have made here in this scenario, even if you have all the tools in front of you. Like it really is a tough thing to try to do. I mean, like John Williams as a composer is just will always be a tough act to follow, but trying to add on and be alongside him contributing something, I think it's an incredible honor for anyone that gets to do that. But also, yeah, I don't fault anyone for being nervous as hell. I can only imagine what that would be like total
yeah,
pressure. But it's something that I think that more people should feel like welcoming of. Like people feel kind of guarded about Star Wars music. They're like, oh well, if it's not John Williams, I'm less interested. And I think that people should really give it an honest chance with new Star Wars because some of it is really, really good. Some of my favorite Star Wars pieces actually are from the contemporary soundtracks. So
and the thing is, like, I mean, people can choose not to get over it, but the fact of the matter is, it's happening. So
yeah,
you can try
get on board or
to.
get left behind, I guess. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I am sort of a well, we're getting a little bit off topic, but Solo I think is going to be a movie that invites a lot of opinions. Well, not that, Last Jedi didn't either, but Solo is a movie that I think a lot of people don't know how to feel about yet, and I say that myself as well because as I've been getting more into Solo because of this podcast and because of the soundtrack, I'm realizing how much a little bit that I have missed in not getting more deep into the soundtrack earlier because I'm not a
so many things
soundtrack
about Solo
listener.
were missed.
In general,
Yeah,
I'm not someone that listens to soundtracks. I'm someone who gets to know the soundtrack just because I watch the movie so much. And since
sure.
Solo is the movie I've seen the least out of the Star Wars movies, I just by extension don't know the soundtrack as well. And um so that's been interesting. Like so now the soundtrack is getting me more into the movie. I'm kind of
That's cool. It's
going,
kind of like a cyclical thing.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like Solo kind of flew under the radar for so many reasons, and it's bizarre to say that about a movie that cost millions of dollars to make. But Solo was the first time that they changed the release date to May instead of December. It was our first non-December Star Wars movie release, and that threw a lot of people off.
Mhm.
It was undermarketed, which threw people off and didn't bring them to the theater. And also, I feel like the production troubles on set were way too highly publicized. Like, it wasn't fully their fault. Like, a lot of it was leaks and things like that. But like, it was very much public discourse that this movie had problems, and that caused a lot of the hype to kind of fade away as well. I think this movie, a lot of people don't know how they feel about Solo, and I think that people are going to be revisiting it in the coming years, because I think that the plot and the events of Solo are going to get revisited in Disney Plus content. I think that like Qi'ra is going to show back up somewhere. Like, things are going to happen that cause everyone to go back and watch Solo again, and then suddenly the public reception of that movie is going to rise because people are going to start appreciating it a bit more, I think.
Yeah. I'm glad that I wasn't. Well, I don't like watch. I don't pay attention to leaks, and
That's good.
I will mute stuff. So like I actually missed a lot of the Solo drama, and I also missed a lot of the Rise of Skywalker drama too. So I cherish the
Jealous.
fact, I cherish that. Yeah. But yeah, after seeing the responses and how much of the responses to the movie sort of depended on like rumors and things about the meta aspects of the film, that kind of just made me not want to.
It's important not to tarnish your own expectations with rumors and things going in, because it's not the movie's responsibility to, like, you know, assuage you of some expectation you now hold because some guy on Reddit posted a thing. Like, that's I think that's an unfair bias to bring into the theater with you. So honestly, if you can avoid leaks, if you can avoid rumors, so much the better, because it doesn't create unfair or false expectations for you as the audience, you know?
Yeah, I agree. So speaking of Solo and soundtracks, there also were leaks of the soundtrack, and I refuse to look at any track lists of soundtracks before movies or shows come out. So
I mean, sure, they can have spoilers in them too, like Qui-Gon's noble end.
yeah, totally. Or even, yeah, I just don't like to know anything. And luckily, Solo, the deluxe edition, came out like way after the movie, and that blessed us with so much more detail in the soundtrack album. So yeah, that is something that I'm really grateful for, because we have, well, we'll get to it later in the season, but you know, both versions of Chicken in the Pot. We have some extra cues
Right.
that weren't on the original soundtrack. It's good stuff. Okay, so now we are in the throes of the Corellia Chase. And as you were saying, there are many different shots happening that kind of give it an energy, that kind of give this a forward momentum. And we're about to hear another one of the themes. Let me just continue playing.
Port at Spaceport, we're gonna be on it. We bribe our way through
This
the
is it.
checkpoint and we're free. I'm gonna be a pilot.
We can get our own ship.
See the
Are you picking up on it?
We won't have to take orders or be kicked around by anyone.
Ever.
That's my favorite part of like maybe the score.
It's great. It is great.
So that is the young Han Solo searching variant, and also composed by John Williams, and it's the part that goes, and I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is really nice.
Something that I note about it is it sounds like the performance of it. Well, first of all, I love good violin writing. I love good violin writing. And this is good violin writing. And to be clear, John Williams wrote themes and did like the Adventures of Han suite on the soundtrack, but he kind of wrote the themes, and then John Powell did most of the like work in the film, incorporating them and everything. So a lot of the
Right.
underscore and a lot of the like way that they appear and orchestration and everything is John Powell and John Powell's team. So
John Williams wrote them. John Powell phrased them.
yeah, or like he decorated them and used them.
He arranged. There you go.
Just like, you know, things like the Rebel Fanfare and other things are pulled in and everything. He still had to figure out how to place them and everything. So here, let me just play. Great violin part. So, young Han Solo searching. Now we have like this crescendo here. And then it goes into something different. I love that. So one thing I wanted to note about the violins is I think that they're playing on either a Sol D or a Sol G technique, which is John Powell posted a score video version of this on YouTube, and it kind of plays the track with a score moving. And I don't know if it was like official score or whatever, but the Sol G was not marked in the part. So I'll explain what that is. You probably know what that is since you are a former string player.
I don't know what that is, actually.
Right. So sul, I'm probably pronouncing it horribly, but sul in Italian means on, and music, classical music language tends to use Italian. So sul G means on the G string. And so the reason that might be marked in a part is if the melody
Oh, okay.
yeah. Now it's coming back to you.
Yeah,
Is not
yeah.
necessarily if it can be played on a higher string. So here what's happening is like
You're saying avoid cross strings at all point and just play it all the way up here
Yep,
instead
yep,
of
yep.
down here on another string. Yep.
Exactly. So here it could be. So I'm playing that on the A string. So the violin has 4 strings. G, lowest. D, which is second. A, third. And the highest is E.
E.
Yep. And so if something were in like ORD, ordinary position, or, the neutral thing, if you had these notes, you would just play that on the A string. So that's the second highest string. But because strings are really long, if you can play something on the A string, chances are you can play it up high on the D string, and there might even be a chance that you can play it super high on the G string. And what that does is it gives it a darker color. And here I'm hearing a darker color because I'm not hearing that much like open A. That's the difference between playing on the A string. If I were to play it on the D string, it would be like. So I don't know how subtle that might sound on the podcast, but
it does. It darkens the tone just a little bit. The lower the resonance of the string that you're playing it on. So playing it on the G, for example.
And then on the G, that same B flat would. So it's like
now it almost sounds like you're playing the viola.
Exactly. So the difference between, I'll go from thickest to thinnest. So it's a color change.
It's a subtle change, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. And because it's not marked in the score, not that that's the final score for sure. I don't know for a fact, but that tends to be something where the session players might just, amongst the section, they might just be like, outside players take that Sol G, or like, half of us do this Sol G, and that tends to be something that like, so, there's so much music in scores, not every tiny detail is going to be written, but the leader of each section of instruments knows to like make certain calls, and will often be like, slur these and whatever. It's things that the composer.
I wonder
and
how
the
many of the
orchestrator.
most iconic moments in score sessions like this come from a number 2 pencil at like the section leader's music stand, and not from like the composer or the arranger, or like some sort of like a democratic decision like that among the session players that contributes to something that ends up being like iconic. I wonder how often that happens.
Oh, I think it happens a lot in the like diegetic tracks, like definitely in Cantina Band and Canto Bite. That was like session players
Definitely.
improvising a lot.
Fun at that point.
Yeah. Those sessions seemed like they were so much fun. And then for the rest of it, I would say probably not too many, especially like I wouldn't call this part iconic necessarily of a detail, but it is like subconsciously makes it feel like, I think it subconsciously affects me at least. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes it gives it more depth. Just any sort of little dynamic changes like that give it more depth, And if it's coming from more than just the arranger and the composer, I feel like that kind of represents that this piece is now alive.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
that
point.
all of the that, like it's an organic thing, and now it's breathing. All of the players are adding their like very, very minute input in subtle ways that nuances it and makes it even more developed than the arranger and the composer's hands.
That's an excellent point. And that is something where it's like on a choice by choice basis, it's not necessarily a big deal. But when you add
Right.
it to like a whole score like this, where it's live orchestra and like like lots of human element introduced, uh, that just there are so many more variations in things that you wouldn't think about, like things that you wouldn't think about when you're programming or writing or,
Totally.
scripting what's
Things
going
that
to
only come up
happen.
in the play tests because you have to
Exactly.
encounter it in practice.
Oh, it is like a play test. You're absolutely right.
And people are just taking their pencils out and working out all the little bugs,
Yeah. Oh
on
my
the
gosh.
manuscript.
I like that analogy a lot. Yeah, okay. Oh my gosh. I'm not a gamer, but that somehow that like completely sticks because normally when there's a slower process, like when you don't have such a budget like this, you don't have that pass where you have people having to play what you wrote. You just program it and that's what it is. So you don't have that opportunity for that like last
Totally.
minute feedback and
I could write an aria and have it sound wonderful on paper, but until I'm hearing someone actually sing it in front of me, I'll be like, actually I don't like that. But I would never have heard
Mhm.
it in here. I have to actually see it in front of me.
Mhm. Or you might like, "Oh, what is that like extra ornament that you added? Yeah, keep that." I like that.
Oh, I like those grace notes there. So
Yeah,
stuff like that. Totally.
totally. Yeah. That's a great point.
That's when the piece comes alive, when the session players get a hold of it and they start making their little calculations.
Yeah, and orchestras, I mean, composers love like composers rarely are given the budget to work with orchestras, but when they do, it's like most of them get very excited because it comes to life in a way that even the mock-up that you make in your DAW, which is, you make your
Right.
computer version of what it sounds like. You think that's final and you think it's what it sounds like, but then somehow when an orchestra plays it, it's different. It's somehow
Well, also
different.
you pointed out that the great point that Powell himself is a violinist, and because of that, the violin parts really shine here. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's been playing French horn his whole life, and maybe the French horn player in the orchestra has a great idea for this that he wouldn't have come onto because his lived experience is different as a musician. And so, like, yes, all the violin parts are definitely going to shine, but now we've got actual cellists in here, French horn players, trombonists, people who also have been doing it, and they can bring a unique perspective to it. So not just the strings are getting favored here in the soundtrack.
Absolutely.
Before it hit the session room, it probably was really favoring the strings. All the cool stuff was happening on the strings. And then once it came in there, a little bit more of that variation probably sunk in other places as other people maybe introduced their own sort of ideas or ways of playing what was already written,
It's very possible. And I think that also like speaks to the importance of trusting everyone in the room and having
Definitely.
like, good lines of communication because I mean, I know what it's like to play in an ensemble where even if you have an idea, you're just kind of scared to even bring it up or you just don't even
Well, I mean,
want to
it's such an
bother.
intense process to even get into that room.
Yeah.
You don't want to jeopardize it by any means, So
Yeah.
I get that. I'd probably feel these. I've never been in that situation, but if I did, I probably would feel the exact same way. I'd be very nervous to speak up. But I feel like that also is kind of the responsibility of the director of the session to make you feel comfortable doing that, or to make it clear that that's not something you should be doing. Either way,
Yeah.
as long as they have clearly communicated that, like you said, clear communication, then you're totally good.
Yeah.
Maybe you should feel nervous. Maybe you shouldn't say anything right now. Like that's up to the director to make that clear before anything begins, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also the section leaders, you just tell the section leader. The section leader can take all the brunt.
There you go.
Yeah. So anyway, all the musicians on this soundtrack are listed in the liner notes on the CD, so that's nice. Okay.
Big
So
shot gangster putting together an orchestra.
yeah, so they did this in London. Okay, so let's continue playing. Where were we?
I'm never gonna learn.
This is a secure area. You must have proper clearance.
Poor droid.
Once, you must follow the proper
He's
They
just doing his
decapitate that
job,
droid,
man.
right?
protocol.
Yeah. his head comes, but then he keeps talking. We got to know that he's not dead.
He has his final word. Yeah. So here we can hear how the music. Okay. So I guess what I was trying to talk about earlier was how it's clearly like the same music that is playing, but it kind of shows up in different ways. You know what I mean? Like
there's like a different intention behind it every time you hear the phrase.
It's like, it's like moved to a different instrument or something different. And you can tell that it coincides with something that we're seeing on screen. So like,
Head start.
so here's like a transitional. So now we're back to the theme.
And then it bursts back in. It's almost like we go to these little interludes every time there's a fresh challenge, and once we're through the challenge, okay, back on the open road, back to the main theme again.
Yeah. And then
Secure area. You must have proper clearance. Stop
Like-
at once. You must follow the proper protocol.
there's so much sound design too. And so now we're here back to the theme, the other theme,
Fast.
Yeah. Yeah, but we're fast, right?
the searching variant.
I hope so.
That was very Han. All of Alden's mannerisms are they're very authentic. They feel like the same character.
Very Alden.
Well, I'm saying Alden is very Harrison here.
Oh, in what spot specifically?
In his response to Qi'ra there. It's like, we're faster than them, right? And he's like, I hope so.
Oh.
Like,
That's so true.
he's like,
That's
I'm
true.
going to do nothing to reassure my friend right now. I'm just focusing on this. I hope so. Like, let's keep going. It's very Harrison. And I feel like Alden doesn't get enough praise for that. Like, he really did capture the mannerisms to the point where I was able to divorce the face from my notion in my head and be able to feel like I was watching a younger version of the character. Like, it took a few scenes, but I was sold pretty quick.
That's awesome. I don't really remember what my initial reaction was, but
I like poured over that trailer a bunch, so I was pretty used to seeing his face by the time I got to the theater. That definitely helped. But yeah, I was sold within a few scenes.
I think it's easier for me to like. I don't think I ever had a big issue with it. I think probably because of the age difference
Sure.
between them.
I had more of an issue with like who asked for this movie. In the first, that was kind of my drawback. Was like a solo movie. Like I heard so many people floating so many ideas, but Han Solo wasn't any of them. But it makes sense. It made sense why they made it. He had just died in 7. You know, spoiler alert if you're like 10 years behind. But like, yeah, catch up. By the way, but that makes sense that you would get like the tributary movie for that character, since he's like sort of like that was his exit from the saga. The same way in Legends, when the new Jedi Order books were coming out, in the first book, Vector Prime, they killed Chewbacca.
Right.
That was the big hook to get your attention, get you reading the book. And shortly after that, Dark Horse Comics put out a Chewbacca series of comics, and it was totally like a tribute to this character who is now dead, kind of thing, like a retrospective. And that was the first thought that I got when they announced Han Solo movie. I was like, okay, they killed him. Now we're getting the Han Solo adventure to sort of like give him a farewell.
It does make sense in context. Like, honestly, the way that all 5 of those movies rolled out so quickly, like in my memory, I kind of forget the order sometimes, especially in those like in that middle territory, because this came out so soon as well. And yeah,
It didn't come out until after Last Jedi, I want to say.
yeah,
But it was
it felt-
announced shortly after 7 was out. So hot on the heels of Han Solo's death in canon, we got the news that there was going to be a young Han Solo movie.
But so soon after Last Jedi is what surprised me.
Yeah, right. The very next film.
Yeah.
They had to wait. They had to establish the dice. They had to remind us all about the dice in Last Jedi.
Oh, that's a good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The order. Okay. The order's all reminding me now. I forgot that.
Because the dice are in the originals, but there's never a moment that the camera lingers on them. It's literally a prop, like a prop detail.
Totally. Yeah.
And they wanted to manufacture a whole moment around it, but they needed more than just those very passive moments in A New Hope. So they had to construct like a little bit of like messaging around the dice in The Last Jedi, which I think they did a good job with.
I liked it.
It did feel a little shoehorned, but I accepted it. I was like, you know what? No, it's fine. I get it. And then they, that was kind of the bridge in Solo. Like in this sequence, even he puts the dice on top of the speeder right when he gets into the chase, right when the chase starts.
So I loved that moment in The Last Jedi when when Leia and Luke are having that force interaction toward the end, and there's the handover of the dice. For some reason, it didn't feel shoehorned to me there. But also, I think I had this memory of the dice being more important already than they were in the movies, and I think it's for the same reason that a lot of people had this mythology surrounding, so many other characters that if you are
Right.
just going from movies, you wouldn't understand why there's this like either cult resurgence in this item or prop or character. But I think it's also merchandising, helps too, and things like
Definitely.
props and things like that. Some of them just catch on, and the dice, for some reason, is one of them that caught on randomly for some reason. And
I didn't even know about the dice from the films. I knew about the dice from the visual dictionary that had like a picture of them and all this information. And then after reading the visual dictionary, I spotted them in the films, but I'd seen them dozens and dozens of times and never picked up on the dice until I read it in a book. So it's really not placed any significance on in the original trilogy. Either that or I'm just thick, but I didn't see them until it was really pointed out to me.
I usually have my dice at the desk, which is like, why do I even have the dice? But I think you're right that like, I don't think I remember them from the movies. I think I remember them from them being such a fan thing that fans always talked about. And then I recognize them from the movies, but definitely my interest in the dice didn't come from the movies. It came from the fans and like them just being present in the fan communities.
Totally.
So, yeah.
They're like on the same level as Wilro Hood with his Cam Tono, his ice cream maker on the
and the
Cloud
stormtrooper
City.
hitting his
Like,
head.
Total blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah. And maybe the Japor snippet, although I would say the Japor snippet probably has a little bit more.
Well, that gets some screen time.
Yeah.
He like it's even in Padme's
That's
like
true.
hands at the funeral.
That's true. Okay.
They skipped an entire movie before bringing that back too.
Oh yeah.
It's in 1 and 3, but like not at all in 2. They're like, remember this? It's a deep cut.
It's true. Yeah, when I wear mine, and someone recognizes it, like someone checking me out at the grocery store in the grocery store line was like, "Is that Japor snippet?" And I was like, "Nice."
Nice.
Okay, so the dice. There's no dice here, but we're talking about Alden capturing Han Solo's character pretty well, and I would agree here. And no better way to do it than in a chase.
Absolutely, going fast.
We have just decapitated a poor protocol droid who is just trying to keep an area secure, trying to make sure they have proper clearance. And
this
the
is AP5's Rebel origin story.
What was that?
This is AP5 from Rebels. This is his origin story.
Oh my gosh.
It's totally not, but it's the same model of droid.
Right. Yeah, this one's RA7, protocol droid, of course. And the fact that they just plow through it is very
fair.
scary.
Han doesn't decapitate it. Moloch is the one that fully runs him over. Because Han and Qi'ra whoosh by him and he's all like, "Oh my, danger, Will Robinson." And then he starts to walk and then Moloch just flattens him.
It's Moloch's fault. It's the worm.
Totally. They're making sure that we know that like he's reckless, but he's not hitting innocent droids.
That's
like,
so funny. That's
guys
true.
are doing that.
So unfortunately there are more people out to stop them. And now we pass by this patrol trooper who's just waiting at the side of the building for people speeding with the speedometer. Like, oh, they're speeding. So the patrol trooper's like, pull over. And we actually have this, we have the siren sound effect, so I'll play it. Okay. Now, they're about to pass the patrol trooper. Did you hear that?
I love it. It's a great siren. It totally sounds like almost like a European siren. but like
It really does.
still from space. Like there's like they put like a phaser on it or something just to make it weird.
um, and yet it's interesting how I'm sure it's a unique sound, but it immediately registers like universally. Well, I don't know universally, but in Europe and the States, I would say, or wherever
Emergency
they release this,
services. Totally.
I think it immediately sounds somehow like we know what it is. We know that sound, even though it's not the exact same
The
sound.
whole of Corellia, especially this section, is so like urban and industrial sounding, and they did a really good job of making that realistic. And that's why I think that our ears are trained to, when we hear that, we're like, oh, it's a siren, because we've already been listening to so many urban sounds in this environment that like
That's true.
like if this chase took place on a jungle planet and suddenly we heard that sound effect, we might not immediately be like, oh, it's a siren.
That's
Be like,
true.
oh, it's a weird bird or some kind of thing. But like, because they've really gone to like we're going through like an industrial warehouse section at this point. And so like, we're just like, we're in that mode, you know, we're thinking of urban things, and like, it totally sounds like a European police siren. But like I said, they put like a filter or like a phaser or something on there to make it like, because it has to be space age, you know?
It sounds
But yeah,
pretty.
it's a great sound.
It's a great sound, and here you're right. We're really on the side of a factory, basically, right here. And before we're like at checkpoints and everything. It reminds me of like port cities, like
Totally.
yeah. It is familiar, even though they're in land speeders and there are protocol droids and worm people, Grindalids.
It's cool. We're going through this section at like 100 and something plus miles an hour, but they're giving us all of this exposition and lore and world building in the background. We're on Corellia, which is a sovereign core world. We're in this industrial section. Suddenly there's Imperial checkpoints. And just beyond that, there's all these factories. And what are they making in the background? TIE fighters. They're assembling a bunch of weapons for the Empire. And it's never mentioned in exposition. Like, we never have to hear about it. Well, I guess we do later when the Han talking about his dad building Corellian starships and how now they shut down the factories to build Star Destroyers. But like, we're supposed to be focusing on Han and Qi'ra and the chase, but they're going through all these set pieces that are giving us the world building and the exposition just sort of silently in the background. And I think that's really, really cool without taking away from the chase and the excitement at all. You see TIE fighters on an assembly line over here. You see Star Destroyers being scuttled up above. Like, it's a really cool way of establishing it within the time period, and also sort of showing a little bit about like the economy of the planet, but without taking anything out of the momentum to actually give us that information. It's just sort of like, if you look to your left as we go through here at 1,000 miles an hour, you'll see a TIE fighter being built.
That's a really good point. I think that, okay, now I'm adding that to my list of things to think about when analyzing a speeder chase scene, is how much
What's
terrain
going on around the chase?
Yeah, not that. Okay, so there's so many levels. Oh my gosh, there's so many levels. So the fact that the speeder chase is the main action, but it's not really the exciting part, because it's a chase. Like it's going to end and it's going to be fine.
And it's
but what
two
we
main
see along the
characters
way,
being chased in the first scene of the movie, like, we know they're getting away.
right? But it's what we see along the way that builds that like world for us. And I
Totally.
think the fact
Because
that
this is
like
our first time seeing Corellia.
yeah, and so the speeder chase really is a convenient way to just see a lot of the place at a
Give us
fast
a quick
speed.
tour. Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of like when I used to go on tour, I would in every new city, I would always take a morning run like before the show, and it was so that I could see as much of the city as possible in
Sure.
the shortest amount of time without like paying to get shuttled around or figure out the transportation system or whatever.
Without having to talk to anyone.
Yeah, and because like taking a walk is fine, and but for me, since I just, I enjoyed doing my morning runs, just getting to run for like an hour around the town, I would be able to cover ground faster than walking. So like literally it would be like a sightseeing way to just see the city fast because I was running. And so
Totally. That's great.
yeah. So it reminds me. So speeder chases, yeah. There is a utility. There is a storytelling utility to them. And
It's not just action for action's sake. They are actually doing some establishing here, both of
Yeah.
the characters and their motivations for leaving, and also of the planet itself and its relationship to the rest of the galaxy and its relationship to the rest of the story as we know it.
yeah, and this is why it's like so important that the whoever is designing the designing the concept art and making all these backdrops and dressing these sets or whatever all these various sets and props are. They're a huge part of this.
Absolutely. The visual language of Star Wars is so important, and you can have something thematically feel completely fresh and new, but if visually it looks like it's rooted in that same world, like it's much easier for people to just accept it. I feel like people are more successful when they take storytelling risks in a really Star Wars shaped box. If they really do a lot to like play up the familiar aspects of it, it's kind of comforting, I guess, for audiences. Like keep one
Star
foot in the
Wars shaped
familiar
box.
while being led into something new.
Yeah, I think that's a good. Yeah, I like that.
Like if you want to introduce a brand new alien species and have it be radically different, I will be much more accepting of it if I see it in a cantina having beers with like a Rhodian and a Shadrafan and a Wookiee, things that I know what they look like, But if it's just a group of these brand new aliens just by themselves, I'll be like, whoa, what is this? This is strange. You need a familiar element in there to sort of bridge the gap, I think.
Yeah, it's like they say in improv, blue doesn't show up on blue. Or whatever that saying is. I've said
totally,
that.
totally.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay. Yeah.
Blue doesn't show up on blue.
Yeah. Unless, but where that works is if you're trying purposely to create an absurdist world, and that's not anchored in reality. In which case, when there's so much blue, it seems normal, and then that just becomes the new normal. But yeah, for these purposes, blue doesn't show up on blue. So here we have a new planet, but it's still familiar. So, and we're seeing it in the speeder chase, which is about to sadly come to an end.
A really entertaining end, though.
Yes, let's listen.
It cracks me up every time.
Pull over.
Oh, this poor man.
So here we get a shot of the dice. Okay, so you can hear how the music kind of is changing. We hear some sound effects.
Oh yeah?
Oh, I'm telling you, it's too tight.
Watch this.
Okay, well, we can't go past that without honoring what just happened. So action-wise, they're like in the it's still the exterior of the factory, but it's sort of like it's the interior. It's how would you describe it? They're like
an
on
open
on the
air
curb.
section. It's like a large foyer kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Like a parking ramp, but it's not. But it's not for parking.
Totally. Just like a covered area of a warehouse. It probably was once a parking lot.
Yeah. And they're speeding along that, and it's pretty narrow.
And getting narrower.
Yep. And then we hear a tiny bit, a hint of the Star Wars main theme, as we just heard. And it, of course, accompanies Han's courage. I don't know, his bravado, his
I think it's his recklessness here, his signature recklessness. We're seeing him display one of his signature traits for the first time, and that's why we get that Star Wars cue,
And that cue doesn't really fully play out. It's just sort of like a hint of it. It's almost like it feels placed in an unnatural way, like on purpose. Like it feels like
it's foreshadowing.
How so?
Because it's suggesting the character that Han will be, but he's not it yet.
Oh.
And so we almost are given the cue, but like you said, it holds back. It's not the whole thing. And then his plan almost works, but it doesn't quite work. It's like the Han Solo of the originals would have found a way to bust right through there, but he's not quite there yet. So it's like, it's a suggestion of what he will be. And in that way, it's foreshadowing kind of the capability of Han as a character, I think.
So here's my theory. I think that I like that. To me, that theme really really represents Luke Skywalker and like the Luke kind of heroism in which you kind of cross your fingers and have to trust in something. And to me, that sounds like Han is just like closing his eyes and crossing his fingers. Like, we know he's not a Force person, so we're not going to put that on him.
Right.
But still, he does a lot of like crossing your fingers and hoping
So you
for the
think it's
best
just
moments.
like a Star Wars hopeful moment?
Yeah.
That could very well be it too. It could be. Who knows? Like, we could get that little introduction of a theme for all of the future leaders of the Rebel Alliance. Like, because Han goes on to do big things,
Mhm.
and like, I just see it as a glimmer of like, this is a person who's not there yet. He's going to try this and he's going to fail, but we know that someday he's going to be blah 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 blah.
I think they both absolutely work. I think this is just a
Totally.
100 interpretation, but yeah, I think
That's the amazing thing about soundtracks, and that's why a show like Star Wars Music Minute can exist. Because there's so many different ways to interpret all of this.
100%. And let's listen to that one more time.
Han, no, we're not gonna make it.
Oh yeah?
Han, I'm telling you, it's too tight.
Watch this.
Nice.
It's an extremely Han Solo thing to try.
Totally. And here, great sound. Oh, and their journey's done. But before they crashed to a halt, you could hear the of them
You can hear
spinning.
You can hear the squeaking of the creaking of the brakes. You can hear the engine sounds. Also, like all of the weird industrial stuff that they're passing by, kind of has its own ambient sound as well. Like, there's so much going on in here, and then I love that it's so clearly a practical effect of it finally slowing and stopping.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I really appreciate
Like that final
when something
bang.
is obviously practical. Yeah, and like the little, just like the smoke exploding out of it.
Like
They could have
visually
gone
as well.
CGI with that route. I feel like I would have
That's true.
enjoyed it significantly less if they had.
I think it looks great, and it is pretty funny how it comes to a halt. And unfortunately, Moloch is still around, and he comes around and he says, "Bring the hounds after them" in Huttese, and we get a shot of Han saying, "Come on," grabs the dice. We got to move, and that's the end of the Corellia track. And for the final 40 seconds of this 5-minute section, we are in the spaceport. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yes. And if you're
Yeah, we
following
head
along,
straight there.
yeah, and they're trying to escape Corellia, and we hear Spaceport 1M6-7, the beginning of it, if you want to follow along on the soundtrack. And so here it is without this. Well, actually, let me just play it. So that cue is the beginning of Spaceport.
Come on. We gotta move.
It's a great establishing shot of the spaceport too.
Yep, and we just got young Han Solo, the first searching version. So, okay, so the three themes that John Williams composed were the young Han Solo heroic, which was the
Right.
and then there was the young Han Solo. There's two searching ones, so that's the other two. So this is the one that we just heard. That one, and then the one that we heard before that I was
The really nice violin one.
with the nice violin one, that is searching variant.
Interesting that we hear the variant first.
Well, we actually do hear the other one in the last set of minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
hear it in the previous 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But those are the three, and I like that we have three separate things for Han's different moods. It makes sense in a solo
appreciate that
film.
Powell gets so much mileage out of the thing that John Williams wrote for it.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell that he's almost afraid to do too much of his own stuff without going back and referencing what was given to him. But I think the little interludes that he adds in between, like these phrases, and the way he chooses to place and incorporate what was given to him,
Yeah,
I think is really, really well done.
absolutely. And John Williams John Powell signed on to do this movie because he knew that John Williams would be writing the themes. Like, he didn't want to do it without John Williams.
Right.
And so John Williams wrote them specifically, and then, was like, do your thing, don't worry too much. Like,
I guess that's what I'm trying to articulate, is that you can hear that respect.
yes, there was a lot of mutual respect between them, and John Powell, like, really, like, I think he handled it brilliantly.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's one of the best contemporary Star Wars soundtracks. And it's an excellent example of like just teamwork, musical teamwork from two completely different composers. Like, and as you said, mutual respect. Like it's really cool what can be achieved, you know, in these circumstances. Like, and it really is inspiring. It's a cool way for John Williams to like have longevity in Star Wars content in the future without having to be completely taxed and without having to come back full time, because I know that he's not interested in that, you know. But
And
like this lighter workload has exciting potential, you know.
yeah, and
If he just comes in, drops a main theme, and then goes home, that's fine. You know,
yeah.
get someone else in here to like flesh that into a 9-episode miniseries, and boom, there's Kenobi. You know,
And the thing with when you get a theme from John Williams, it's like really fleshed. It's really good.
it's dense, it's
Like it's
thick.
yeah,
You can take layers off of it, and you have all of these other contributing themes under it. And he's given you like 25 themes
it's
rolled
very
into one.
substantive. And the thing is, it as a kind of handover. I mean, not only is John Williams like John Williams, he is also
Right,
someone who knows Star Wars films very well. Like he knows Star Wars just on a level that John Powell doesn't, just
right.
because of he. I mean, it's undeniable. He has
In order to write scores in leitmotif and to give everyone their own emotional motif, you have to understand the
exactly
emotions behind every single character on such a fundamental level that like that's kind of that is, you know, the unsung brilliance of John Williams, is that everyone lauds him as an amazing composer. Dude's a pretty excellent like Star Wars buff too. He would have to be, you know, he
exactly.
knows everything there is to know about like the connections between so many characters. Like I would love to talk to him, obviously about the music, but I'd love to just talk to him about Star Wars lore and what his take is on that too, honestly.
hmm I've heard the sound designers of The Last Jedi, Ren Kleiss and Matthew Wood. I've heard them in an interview, or maybe it was someone else, talking about how the process between doing the scoring and the sound effects, like they'll hear something that John Williams has scored in a scene, and because of the way that he scored it, it like dawned. There were moments where it dawned on them that he was reading something into the scene that they hadn't seen, that they weren't even. So like all the people that add their flavor to a scene or to a moment in Star Wars, they're all kind of interpreting it and putting something on there that is their
Totally.
interpretation. And so absolutely, like John Williams would be like making certain connections that maybe other people wouldn't through the music. And yeah, it's I think you're totally right there. Um, he understands Star Wars on a totally different level, a totally unique level,
A very
than anyone
intimate
else.
level, honestly, because he interprets his emotion, and then it's his music that really solidifies that emotion for the rest of the audience. So, you know, the director and the actors and the writers can send it in a certain direction, but it's really John Williams has the power to change that and make it a completely different direction if he wanted to.
Or imbue
Like,
something with musical subtext.
yeah, he is the emotional taskmaster of the movies, because he tells you how you're supposed to feel,
Yeah.
you
He is
know?
the Palpatine.
Yeah, he's the real Palpatine here. He has the most power.
Um, yeah, so it is very cool that he did his themes for Han, a character that he knows more than anyone,
Absolutely.
composer-wise, and passed it on to John Powell, who knows heist movies. So,
Who knows heist movies and
just
action and
yes,
has the energy of a young man.
John Powell scored The Italian Job
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay, there you
and
go.
also the Bourne movies.
Okay. You know, I will have to rewatch the Bourne movies because I love them a lot. I don't think I've ever paid attention to the music.
I've never seen
So I'll have
them.
to go back and rewatch. I think
I
they just
just
got
know that he
added
did
Netflix.
them. But yeah, he definitely did Italian Job. And so
Okay.
this is and this is
Italian
definitely
Job's
less
great.
of a Force movie. So anyway, um, now they're in the spaceport and we mostly hear the loudspeakers. We hear some
Total tonal shift as soon
yeah.
as they walk into there. It's
Yeah, it goes from
completely
like this bravado of this like escape, and then they're like in a spaceport, which I don't know, like an airport, it's kind of awkward. You kind of just stay to yourself a little bit. You hear stuff over
There's
the
like an
PA.
impending suspense, like a dread almost when they go in there. And I don't know, maybe I just don't carry enough drugs on me when I go to LAX, but I never feel that kind of dread walking into the airport. But the way I like the music in the moment before, it's like adventurous and exciting. And then as soon as they walk in, it's like the stakes have gone up. And I feel like I wrote a note here. Where is it? I think that it represents that the stakes are finally beginning to sink in for Han, and that his escape attempt, it was very reactive and was very impulsive, and now he has to sort of play it cool and be a little bit more slow and steady, and that has never been his skill suit. And for that reason, now the stakes are starting to raise, and we really hear that in the music, that it just feels like suspense, and suddenly you're uncomfortable and you're nervous. A minute ago, we were having a good time in the speeder ride, and now we're just sort of like, oh, whoa, we've got to be very careful. We're seeing stormtroopers in the crowd. We're seeing the long lines, all of the security. And yeah, Han, the confidence that has been building and building and building in the chase is gone.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
it's just him now, and the music is very small. It's very small below it.
Yeah. Yeah. The chase is the easy part for him. This is now
Totally.
this is where the real scary part.
Running away comes natural, but now you've got to blend in, you've got to do all these things, and that is not his strong suit. And so like you can feel his nervousness, and that again is just brilliant use of the music to convey that emotion, because there's so much going on the screen, we don't know what to focus on, and now we don't have to choose because we're just feeling it, you know?
Yep. Yep. So let's listen to that last few seconds.
Do not join the line if you don't have a boarding pass. No access without ID chip. All droids must be registered. Right, move along. Move along.
Do not resist.
So the young searching theme.
Take him to cell 3B. This way, come on. Keep moving. Hold it.
Next.
That way she says, next.
I know.
Well, that's where we end with these 5 minutes.
She says it with extreme disdain. I love it. I love that I guess all of the sequence is pretty washed out, and there's not a lot of color going on. Like a lot of blues, a lot of hues going on, especially in Proxima's den. And then we go outside and it's overcast and it's still kind of gray. But it's almost like these 5 minutes are losing color as time goes on. Like the saturation of Proxima's den is a very rich blue. It's almost as blue as the background behind me. And then we go outside, it's a little paler. And by the time we get to the spaceport, there's almost no bright color whatsoever. All of those people walk around and they're wearing like dark grays and blacks. Stormtroopers are just wearing like a pallid white. Qi'ra's red shirt in that scene, I think, is the most colorful thing in the whole thing. And it's really just sort of driving home the same with that world building during the chase, the oppression of the Empire. That this is a joyless place. You know, it's devoid of color. It's devoid of like, there's no kids running around. There's not even any like anyone looking like they're casual. Everyone is like downtrodden and laden with like belongings, and everyone looks kind of beleaguered or oppressed in some way.
And we see stormtroopers like kind of I don't know, beating someone into submission, or like not beating.
Yeah.
We
like
see
getting real handsy, and then they're doing like customs enforcement or some kind of like security thing. And then it's in the following moments that they kind of like develop a little bit, and then we get that little like the Empire propaganda video, which I love. I love that part. But yeah, it's really, they make a point of showing you how drab and like bleak everything is, and we don't get vibrancy until we're off this planet, you know, until we leave this planet behind us. And it's very, or really till we leave the Empire behind, because then he joins up with the Empire, and Mimban is just as colorless, you know. So it's really, for the whole first act of the movie, like it's so just, you know, very, very grim, very barren, not the kind of like vibrant colors that you expect from Star Wars. And I think that the only thing that's vibrant really is the music here, honestly, because Han is a vibrant person and he's in this setting that doesn't quite fit him. And with the chase music is more Han than the surroundings are. And I feel like that's why the music is so important here, is because it's the only thing that's really exciting and engaging. Everything else kind of blurs together. And that's by design, I think.
Yeah, Han's kind of the kind of character that you he has trouble stuffing himself in.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we end on that cliffhanger, and we're at the end of the 5 minutes. So I'll just recap the themes and the soundtrack stuff. The themes from these minutes are the 3 young Han Solo themes. It's young Han Solo according to the thematic catalog. If you want to pay attention to the way that these are numbered, this would be number 1, young Han Solo, heroic. 2A, young Han Solo, searching, and 2B, young Han Solo, searching variant. But yeah, it's the 3 themes that John Williams composed, and then the soundtrack. It's the end of Bunk/Proxima, which is about the last 10 seconds if you have the deluxe edition. And then it's the full track of Corellia Chase on both versions. And then the beginning, about the first minute of Spaceport. So yeah, we're going pretty nicely along in the soundtrack. Just nice that it actually correlates so far.
Yeah, that's somewhat rare, actually.
Yeah. Are you ready for the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire?
I am ready for the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire.
Rad. All right. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
I thought probably too much about this question, and so I came up with 3 adjectives.
Nice.
But also 3 onomatopoeia words.
Okay.
So my 3 adjectives would be epic, exotic, and alive. And I think alive is the most important one of those 3. When it comes to onomatopoeia, I said pew pew.
Nice.
So I either of those
I'll put
answers.
them both. Can you? But let me know how to spell the second one later.
Just face roll on the keyboard. That's how I.
Okay.
That's how I write in Shreebook.
Question number 2. What is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you're particularly interested in that you want to learn more about?
The process of crafting new sounds to represent specific species or technology. I'd really like to know more about what sort of parameters sound designers are given for like what they want things to sound like, and how are we like articulating and quantifying sound from a layman to an expert? Like what is the sound engineer handed? Like I want it to sound wibbly wobbly or something like totally like subjective, and he has to interpret that. I'd love to know more about the process of like what you like. We know what the seismic charge sounds like, but I want to know what seismic charge B, C, D, and E sounded like that weren't picked, like, and how he came up with these options. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Cool. And the third question is, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
I listen to a lot of soundtracks, and it kind of rotates for me. And right now I'm really stuck on the Kingdom of Heaven soundtrack by Harry Gregson Williams. Kingdom of Heaven was Ridley Scott. It was like 2005 medieval movie about the siege of Jerusalem starring Orlando Bloom. And I love the soundtrack. It feels like authentic in that he uses a lot of medieval instrumentation, and he uses it from regions of the world that the scenes take place in. Like different instruments are used in the recording of the England scenes versus the Jerusalem scenes and things like that. It's also coming off of that wave of like when Howard Shore did Lord of the Rings in the early 2000s, and then suddenly there was like these huge choral parts in all of the movies. This is very much in that same vein, and there's a lot of like choir pieces in this that I really, really like. Ridley Scott made a big point of saying that when he filmed this movie, he didn't watch any films for like 10 years while he was working on it because he didn't want to be influenced by anything, which means he never saw like Lord of the Rings, the Star Wars prequels, all kinds of things. But I know for a fact that Harry Gregson Williams is a big fan of Howard Shore. So I'm sure that the soundtrack still influenced the soundtrack, even if the movie claims to be uninfluenced by other movies. But the soundtrack is super strong, and I really love it.
I've never even heard of this movie, so...
It's I mean, it came out the same year as Return of the King or Revenge of the Sith, so it was kind of overshadowed by other blockbusters. It's it's got Liam Neeson, Orlando Bloom, the guy who played Lupin in Harry Potter, Eva Green is in it. It's excellent. It's really, and it's historical, mostly accurate, I think. So
Qui-Gon's in it.
Yeah, Qui-Gon, and he's very Qui-Gon in this. He's a Knight Templar who's like all sagely giving advice to Orlando Bloom. It's wonderful.
That's cool. Can I ask you Can I ask you a bonus question out of my own curiosity?
Sure.
So
Extra credit.
yeah, extra credit. If you had like if you could speak directly to listeners right now, what is something that you would encourage people to take a pay special attention to in this set of minutes with regard to maybe like a favorite sound or like some musical moment or
Oh,
maybe like what
sure.
would be like a question that you could pose, something related to these minutes.
I would say kind of what I brought up earlier. I would say really pay attention to what is going on in the background during fast-paced moments like the chase. Like, because there really are a lot of like important world building information and Easter eggs and references to other Star Wars media that can be found, like those TIE fighters being assembled. And basically as soon as something becomes a little bit like higher action, that's when you really kind of have to like really have your eyes open and start, because shots tend to last, like they go by quicker, so it's easier to catch things. And I don't know, I would say rewatch fast sequences over and over again until you know what every single extra does in every moment, because sometimes there's really priceless background acting in these action moments, and I think this is one of them. The cop with his unfortunate flip, his flip death as he's trying to pull them over. It's amazing.
Cool. Well, thank you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on all the various social medias as Kyle Katarn. I mostly am on YouTube and Twitch, reacting to and reviewing Star Wars fan films, movie trailers, comic books. Pretty much if it's Star Wars related, I have something to say about it, and I have said something about it on my channel. I stream all the Star Wars games you can think of on twitch.tv/Kyle Katarn official, and every Wednesday I do dramatic reads of the new Star Wars comics that come out that day. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty silly. Come and check it out if you want.
And he reviews every fan film.
Yes, I'm trying to get my hands on every Star Wars fan film ever made. I'm up to almost 200 at this point.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's been a fun ride.
If you have a fan film to send to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to react to a fan film, so send it to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for listening. Star Wars Music Minute is on all of the social media platforms, all of them. Not a single one is missing. No, I'm just kidding. A lot of them are missing. But I'm on TikTok at Star Wars Music Minute, Twitter at Star Wars Museman, and you can find other links in the show notes. I don't have a closing plug yet, but I need to think of one. And I said I was going to do it for this season, but I haven't yet. So by episode 3, I will have some sort of a way to end this, not awkwardly. So until then, I'll see you next week. Stay in school, kids. I'll see you next week on Star Wars Music Minute.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a really good time.
Likewise. Thank you so much.